This is the Tortoise. It's the last complete survivor of a World War II project that arrived too late. It's been called the British Jagdtiger, but it's not a tank destroyer.
In fact, it's got far more in common with Valiant, T14 and the equally huge TOG-2.
Because like them, Tortoise is a heavy assault tank, and it represents the Allies' final attempt at trying to put one of these in the field. So why was it built? What was it for? What were its strengths and weaknesses? And why is it so big in here?
The purpose of a heavy assault tank is to lead an assault on heavily fortified defensive positions with the aim of neutralising them and breaking through.
A bit like the British concept of the infantry tank. It doesn't need to be fast because it's there to support infantry, but it does need to be able to absorb a lot of punishment at close range.
And to put those positions out of action, it needs to pack a hefty punch itself, something capable of destroying concrete emplacements, for example. And it needs to have good climbing and gap crossing ability, because these sorts of defences will likely include tank obstacles and ditches to make the approach challenging.
Thick armour means added weight, and the need for mobility creates a whole range of engineering challenges. Plus, there's also the need for space to mount a very large gun and to store its ammunition. All in all, those are a pretty demanding set of requirements, and that perhaps explains why a satisfactory British heavy assault tank never actually made it into the field. But perhaps Tortoise is as good as it gets.
Arriving in late 1945, the Tortoise, rather like the Centurion, encouraged us to ask the rather futile question, what if it had been ready sooner?
Well, it wasn't. And while 25 were ordered, only 6 were built. Now, the reason for that is that unlike the Centurion, the world's first universal tank, promising concept, the idea of the heavy assault tank was redundant before the war was over. Some people have called Tortoise the British Jagdtiger, and I grant you there are similarities. Big gun, thick armour, casemate construction. But Jagdtiger was a misguided attempt at building a tank destroyer. Tortoise was very firmly designed as a heavy assault tank, a tank designed to take on fixed fortifications. And you can see that by looking at the basic requirements of the vehicle. This massive casemate construction, this is just one huge casting, and it makes up a lot of the 78-ton weight of the vehicle. As a pre-production model, this vehicle is unarmoured. That's what that red triangle means. But it's massively thick. It's 230 millimetres at the front, decreasing to 178 on the sides. In cast steel armour, that would represent a massive degree of protection. The gun itself, the Ordnance quick-firing 32-pounder, would be ideal for smashing concrete fortifications.
With a top speed of 11 miles an hour, it's powered by the 600 horsepower Rolls-Royce Meteor V12 petrol engine, making it reliable, if not slow and a little overworked because of the weight. The name Tortoise is very apt.
So if it had been ready in time, what was it they hoped the Tortoise would actually do?
Even in the darkest moments of 1940, Britain was planning to defeat Germany. This would mean winning on German soil. To do that, they'd need to get through the Siegfried Line first, an imposing defensive line that ran from Kleve on the German-Dutch border right down to the Swiss frontier. 630 kilometres of fortifications, including more than 18,000 bunkers, anti-tank ditches and tank traps. It was this challenge that drove the requirement for the heavy assault tank, but there was still most of a war to fight before it would be needed. Perhaps for that reason, specifications tended to be a little vague, and more immediate priorities, such as building better tanks to replace the losses of Dunkirk, focused design and production attention elsewhere.
Nevertheless, there was a fair bit of work being done to find a vehicle that would fulfil the role before Tortoise arrived in 1945. Let's have a look at the heavy assault tanks that came before.
In 1940, the initial TOG project was an attempt to create a British equivalent of the French Char de Fortress. It had some very innovative features, such as petrol-electric drive, but the project was superseded by TOG-2, which arguably had a more evolved scope. The A38 Valiant is certainly a contender for the worst British tank of the war, but it was designed with the aim to have the thickest armour for the lowest weight.
To keep the weight down, the hull was made as small as possible, and this frontal casting just about wraps around the driver's position. The turret, and the War Office insisted on a 3-man turret, overhangs the hull on both sides. The end result was this. It's basically just a medium tank with 114mm of armour and an OQF 75mm gun. So it's difficult to know what is under consideration in the first place. It was intended for the Far East, but then a policy was brought in that said that any project that couldn't be completed by the end of hostilities was to be terminated. The project was abandoned because of this. But there's also another reason. In a test run in 1945, the tank broke down after just 13 miles, having more or less crippled the driver, who was also in danger of serious injury from the controls. The A33, this is the only survivor, was born out of concerns regarding the Churchill, which had performed very poorly in the 1942 Dieppe raid.
Such was the poor opinion of Churchill's, in fact, that at one point it was proposed to cease production in favour of Cromwell, but also to use the Cromwell chassis to produce a more heavily armoured replacement for the Churchill, an assault tank. A33, therefore, was based on a Cromwell chassis with added armour to a maximum of 114mm and mounting a 75mm Ordnance QF gun. As such, the A33 didn't really meet the requirements for armour or firepower that a heavy assault tank needed. In any case, the Churchill had proved itself in Tunisia and Italy by the time the A33 was ready.
The A33 requirement lapsed, and the project never went beyond the prototype stage. From the same specification as the A33 came this, the T14 Assault tank. It has a cast turret, welded hull, up to 133mm of armour, heavily sloped. Intended as a joint British-American design, the T14 could mount either the US M375mm, like this one, the British 6-pounder, or a 105mm howitzer. This is one of 2 prototypes built by the American Locomotive Corporation for a projected production run of 8,500.
The problem was that the design and testing process took so long, this prototype didn't arrive in the UK until 1944, that British tank policy had changed in favour of fast cruiser tanks, and the problems encountered with the early Churchill had been ironed out.
With a lack of British interest, the US Ordnance Department dropped the project in December 1944. The T14 never entered production.
Carrying on from the original TOG, the TOG-2 project, our TOG, saw torsion bar suspension and modular armour added to the petrol-electric drive carried over from TOG-1.
The project was sidelined, not, it seems, through any particular shortcomings, but through political interference from Duncan Sands. He was Financial Secretary to the War Office and, incidentally, Churchill's son-in-law. Now, for some reason, he preferred Tortoise. Tortoise had originated in an April 1943 memorandum from the War Office and the Ministry of Supply, giving a vague specification for an assault tank.
Nuffield Mechanisation and Aero responded, drafting 18 separate designs between May 1943 and February 1944, as they sought to keep pace with ever-changing ministry requirements. With each one bigger and heavier than the last, a design was finally approved and a pre-production run of 25 ordered.
They were to be available for operational service from September 1945. But, as we know, the war in Europe ended in May before the Tortoise was ready.
We can only really guess at how the Tortoise would have performed in its intended role by looking at the evidence we're left with.
Good armour? Check. Massive casemate construction eliminates the gaps and weaknesses that you get with a turret and a turret ring.
It will be able to survive a hit from something nasty like an 88, even at close range.
But because of all that armour, it is very big and heavy. And that means compromises both in mobility and transport. just getting this 78-ton tank somewhere where it's going to be needed is never going to be easy.
It was too heavy for any of the bridging units used by the British Army, such as the Bailey Bridge, and getting the thing anywhere on a tank transporter meant using doubled-up diamond T-prime movers. Its sheer size seems to have made rail transport impossible.
The 34.8-inch wide tracks would help to spread the vehicle's 78-ton load, but they would also cause quite a lot of damage to roads and bridges. And these heavy side skirts give very little ground clearance, so cross-country mobility is going to be impeded. And I'm afraid the tediously slow 11 miles an hour top speed is a consequence of the sheer weight of the vehicle. On the plus side, under these decks is the Rolls-Royce Meteor engine. That is a down-rated version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin aero engine, so think Spitfire, Hurricane, Lancaster. As a tank engine, it was used with great success in the Cromwell, Comet and Centurion. It is one of the best tank engines of the war. Only here, it has to work much, much harder. And as a result, it's much thirstier. Now, engine performance is governed by power to weight ratio, the amount of horsepower per tonne of weight.
For example, the 32-ton Comet had a power to weight ratio of 18:1. Its top road speed was 64 kilometres an hour, governed to 51.5 kph to avoid track and suspension damage.
But in the Tortoise, this drops to just 7:1. Tortoise's fuel tanks hold 116 gallons, but especially when you're dealing with poor quality wartime pool petrol, that only gives you a range of about 87 miles, 1.3 gallons per mile.
Despite this, the Meteor engine, coupled with the Merritt Brown all-speed transmission, which gave 6 forward and reverse gears, meant that mechanically at least, Tortoise appears to have been in relatively little trouble.
Firepower, check. Tortoise mounts the Ordnance QF 32-pounder, which is a modified version of the 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun. It had been intended as a replacement for the 17-pounder anti-tank gun, with the possibility of tank use. But it was thought too big and cumbersome. In the Tortoise, it was absolutely ideal. Loaded with a separate charge case and projectile, the 32-pounder APC-BC round achieved a muzzle velocity of 880 metres a second. It was massively destructive against concrete, and also, although that wasn't its main purpose, against armour as well.
Test firing against a Panther, the round went straight through the frontal armour and right through the vehicle with ease at a range of 1,000 metres. It was also highly accurate, with the ability to hit a specific part of a target cleanly and precisely at long range.
This would have made the Tortoise extremely valuable as a gun platform in a far wider range of scenarios than was originally intended. The gun sits in a ball mount in an armoured collar that gives 20 degrees of traverse left and right, and elevation and depression of +20 to -10. Now, for a weapon that's not designed to engage moving targets, that is perfectly adequate.
The aiming periscope is on the right, protected by the collar, with a gun crutch beneath to support the heavy weight of the gun while travelling.
The camouflage pattern on the barrel, which is something you first see with the Sherman Firefly, was intended to deceive an enemy as to the length of the barrel. There is plenty of space inside, but of course with 7 crew, it's all needed. What's also needed is for you to like and subscribe. Our analytics tell us that 50% of our regular viewers are not subscribers. So, you know what to do. Right, let's get inside. As you can see, it is very big in here, but it would need to be, because not only do you need space for a huge breech of this 32-pounder gun and its 2-part ammunition, but you've also got 7 crew. Starting with the breech, it's quite surprising when you look at it to begin with. There doesn't appear to be much in the way of recoil gear, but there is in fact a concentric recoil cylinder around the gun barrel. And of course some of the recoil will be absorbed by the very long run back, hence the folding recoil cage. This is the gunner's position on the left-hand side of the breech, and the gunner's controls are the traverse And right down here underneath the breech, the elevation wheels. And then this is the bracket for the gun sight, telescopic sight, now missing, I'm afraid. On the outside, as we saw earlier, that is actually protected by the collar of the gun itself. Behind the gunner and slightly higher up is the whole machine gunner, this Bisa MG, and there's a rack for a belt box down there, and then that's the hopper for spent brass. At the back is the commander's position, the seat, hatch and traversable cupola with 7 vision blocks. There's also an azimuth dial here which shows the degree of traverse of the main gun. In the middle is the working space for the 2 loaders. Now I'm going to need some assistance for this next part, but of course there were 2 loaders. So the 32 pounder took 2-part ammunition. So we've got ready racks around here for the projectiles themselves, and then charge bins at the back. Just there. The rest of the ammunition is stored underneath the floor. So if you can grab hold of that a second. Those are the bins for the remainder. It's worth mentioning that there were 6 prototypes and the internal arrangements did vary. Over on the right hand side is the twin Bisa machine gun mount with twin firing buttons. It is of course traversable, and there is racking for ammunition boxes and a hopper for spent brass. Now, I have heard this described as an anti-aircraft mount, but from my perspective, situational awareness is negligible, and I don't think the traverse speed is fast enough, so I think it'd be far more effective against ground targets. This is the driver's position with his seat, tillers, gear shift, handbrake, pedals for accelerator, brake, clutch, and then his instrument panel.
His instrument panel has a speedometer, oil pressure and engine temperature gauges, and a twin fuel gauge, 1 for each tank.
The speedometer goes up to 25 miles an hour, which is frankly pretty optimistic. Despite the fact that Tortoise is really quite an unorthodox vehicle, it's actually reassuringly tanky in here. There are things like extractor fans. There's a small mortar for smoke or signal flares, massive stowage everywhere, everything from water bottles to the cleaning brush for the mortar. And just here we have a maker's plaque giving the date of 1947.
The Tortoise was intended for use with the 79th Armoured Division, which would have made it one of Hobart's funnies. This makes sense given the specialist nature of the 79th's inventory and the way in which the division was deployed in support of set-piece operations.
It also suggests that the vehicle would have seen limited use, but doubtless a use would have been found for it. Whether it would have been the stuff of legends or a bit of a joke is very difficult to say.
The Siegfried Line didn't prove to be the obstacle the Allies thought it would be. It had been stripped of heavy weapons for the Atlantic War, and a combination of air and artillery superiority meant the defences could be smashed by more conventional means. So the need for the Tortoise was already in question, even before the 6 pre-production examples were being tested.
So by April 1945, Tortoise appeared to be a solution in search of a problem. And with the Cold War looming, strategic priorities had shifted and the project was abandoned. Today, this is the only complete survivor of the 6 built, with the others either scrapped or sent to the ranges.
The Tortoise last ran at Tankfest 2011. Will it ever run again?
Would you like it to? Let us know in the comments below.